All right, hello everybody. We're back at the No Leon County podcast. I'm your host, Michael Rice. I've got Ann McCausland
Hello.
and Daniel McCausland, and a special guest tonight, Rob Altman.
Howdy, everyone.
And I sound funny because I'm a little sick now. I'm getting the allergies, the air quote allergies.
Yes.
All right, so Rob, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for folks that don't know who you are?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, y'all. I'm so grateful to get a chance to be with y'all and hang out tonight for a little bit. I am someone who served our country for 25 years. I enlisted in the Army when I was a younger man, and then ultimately I had some great people in my life who saw some things in me and encouraged me to finish my undergraduate education. And so I went to Texas A&M and finished there, and then became an officer. And altogether, I served 25 years in military service, and I just had it was such a blessing to be able to go all over the world and do all these things and see people and have leadership experiences and grow as a leader and as a person, and be educated and just get a chance to do some awesome stuff. So I served overseas in Iraq and other places in the Middle East and been to a lot of different foreign countries. And then after I had to medically retire in 2018, my family and I moved to North Texas, and then we were very involved in the community. My kids were in scouting. We went to church, and I was really involved in the veteran advocacy program there, because I just, like any passion that, it's good when you leave one career and go to another to try to find something that can help you bridge the gap so that you don't lose the whole identity of who the heck you are. So, and then, fast forward, I'm back down in Brazos County, and we've lived here, gosh, multiple different times over the course of my career. And we're in that A&M club, so we love it. And so I've been looking for a reason to come back to A&M for a couple of years and interviewed for a couple of different positions. And then this last November, everybody found out that Congressman McCall was retiring. And so a bunch of friends said, "Hey man, we think you should jump in this. You've got a servant's heart and you need to go for it." And so, it's a little eye-opening. I'm not going to lie. And, but my passion for serving others is why I met y'all, and
Yeah.
I'm excited that that's the reason I'm here, because I'm like, all right, we get to do something good that helps people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, so now
And I would like to just mention that we're filming this in the middle of the Super Bowl. So
Oh,
Rob took time off from watching football to hang out with us.
yeah. It's like 7:40 p.m. on during the Super Bowl right now for those of you that are listening later. So,
Yes.
so Rob, you're down here in the heart of the farmland, rural farmland right now.
Yeah.
Do you think should prime farmland have any kind of protections similar to wetlands or conservation lands, or the way that like you can't just come into town with a nuclear site, things like that?
Yeah, and I absolutely think there should be protections, and there needs to be balance, right? Because prime farmland is actually strategic infrastructure. And so I mentioned being in the service. One of the things I studied a lot was national security, and people don't often connect agriculture to national security. But if you jump down a rabbit hole and you say, two of our four meat packing plants in the United States are actually owned by foreign countries, well, that kind of raise your eyebrow. And some of the stuff we learned about logistics and supply chain management during the pandemic make you go, you know what, we probably should be able to think through a bad situation and be able to plan out some of those things, because prime farmland is strategic, and once it's gone, it's gone. I'm not saying don't develop, but it does mean that you need to think about the long-term impacts of that development and what is it going to do. And so sadly, I just think a lot of people don't either they don't know or they don't want to take the time to think about impacts, right?
Right.
I'll say this probably a couple times a night. One of the economists that I love to read is Thomas Sowell, and he talks about there being no solutions, only trade-offs. And I learned this in the military because in the military we talked about second and third order of effects. So if I make a decision, what's the impact that happens 2 or 3 steps down the road of that? And so
Right.
food security, water access, rural economies are just as important as industrial expansion, and we have to have those hard and frank conversations.
Yep.
Responsible growth.
Yeah.
Growth is good,
100%.
but you need responsible growth.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you think about the Industrial Revolution and how that exploded, and I'm going from very high strategic level to myopic all of a sudden, but we have learned from all of the things that impacted people who were working in factories and mills way back at the beginning of the 20th century. Oh, we need to have ventilation from a safety perspective in an industrial working environment, or else our people are going to get sick, and better yet, they may develop some serious long-term respiratory illness. So yeah, we've got to talk about responsible growth.
Yeah.
If these tech oligarchs is the best word I can use, these big industrial developers that are worth billions and billions of dollars, they can outbid farmers for land when land comes
Right.
up for sale. If they want it,
That's
they
right.
can come in and buy it.
That's
Should the
right.
government be able to step in, or is that just part of the free market? I mean, should the government allow us, the farmers, some protection?
Well, I think that the free market works best when the rules are fair. Okay. And if the developers are outbidding the farmers without subsidies, without tax breaks, without special access to infrastructure, then that's the market. But when government tips the scales with incentives or fast tracked approvals or taxpayer funded utilities or trumped up certifications for risk mitigation, that's not free market. That's favoritism. And in my opinion, that's government interference.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
So
I
when it
can't get a
comes
tax
to
abatement if I want to go buy 900 acres.
exactly, yeah. So when it comes to converting that prime farmland, would you support limits on converting that prime farmland into industrial use?
Yeah, absolutely. I may not last in politics long, y'all, because it's got, I mean, but somebody's got to stand up and just ask the hard question. I mean, you don't have to scream or throw grenades, but I envision being on the floor of the House of Representatives saying, yes, to your question, limits should be tied to water availability, fire risk, grid capacity, long-term impact, not just zoning maps. If a project can't stand on its own without, messing up rural resources, then it doesn't belong there. And quite frankly, as somebody who was fortunate to work in the financial industry for 3 years, albeit operations, I learned a lot from the control space and the risk space because people would, if we were going to change something because somebody said it was going to save the company $50,000 a quarter or whatever, we had to prove with data and show a business case that this was going to work out this way. Because in that financial industry, they knew that if you move 3 people here, you're going to mess with their life a little bit. If you remove some full-time positions and make them part-time positions, you're messing with people's lives.
Right.
I think it's directly analogous to what we're talking about regarding prime ag land and industrial use.
Yeah.
Well,
100%.
what about water? Water it's not a infinite resource. At some point, they keep saying we're going to run out. The aquifers are low. All of our lake levels are low everywhere, all over the state. So, with water being finite, who should have priority to that? The agriculture or industrial facilities?
Well, I was really surprised. I want to say I was a company commander and I was in the Army, and one of my fellow captains got out, and he studied water at MIT, and this is like 2011, and at that time I was like, water, and I just wasn't aware. And he said, "Oh yeah, water's going to be an issue, Rob." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about? Third world, right?" And he goes, "No, First world. And so that's where I first started hearing about water as a limited resource. And so I thought, man, what about all that watering of my lawn that, is
Right.
going on? And then some communities, they do, hey, you only water on your trash day or whatever. And, and I mean, out in the country, you're just like, okay, I'm going to let that grow because it looks good because it's natural, or I'm going to, whatever. But, I think agriculture, and I'm leaning in hard on the national security implication relative to people and our survivability, okay, long term. I mean, when you talk to somebody who wants to go camping or go on a long hike, the first thing you think about is, where are my water sources, right? We all need water to live. And then if we're joking about those of us that, may jump into the prepper zone every once in a while, we're like, oh, I want to get out there and I need a water source and I need a reverse osmosis purifier and all this stuff. And I'm having a little levity here with it, but that's the reality. You need water to live. So water feeds people first. Industrial projects should adapt to available resources, not displace farmers and ranchers, because they're dependent on that water to survive. That whole, if we talk about an ecosystem as a business model, that whole ecosystem as a business model relies on water. And one of the calls I made this last week, thinking about y'all and getting ready for this, is a friend of mine who was a nuclear submariner. He's a nuclear officer, a lot smarter than I am. He's an engineer and he works in Houston. And y'all, he works putting natural gas generators in service and building those units. And I was blown away when he started telling me about the production capability relative to power and natural gas generators. And because I was calling him to ask him about, could you use that outside of water? But he said, no, there's still going to be a water function in a data center system, but it could limit the need for water, right? So there is technology that companies can lean into rather than just completely knocking out a drain on water.
It costs a lot of money though, and they aren't willing to spend the extra money to go the extra mile. They could use a desalination plant on the coast, but now you add $60 to $100 million to their budget.
Well, that's why you guys need to keep banging the drum.
We are.
Yep.
We are.
Y'all are doing a great job.
You mentioned the gas generators. So should industrial projects like this are coming into these rural areas that really don't have great infrastructure already? I can tell you, Navasota Valley is our electric co-op. We can't choose another electric company, and if a bird lands on the wire during the day, my power is going to go out. So our grid is already strained here. Should they be required to bring their own power generation in? And not rely on.
I think so. I was really surprised when, if I said his name, everybody like, whoa, you're firing across the bow, Rob. But there was a very high, powerful elected official recently saying, oh, our grid's just fine. And I went and talked to a guy over at one of the utility. He's a friend from church, but I'm also learning about utilities and the grid relative to this race. And he said, we're okay in most cases, but we need to upgrade. And I thought, wow, that's one of the things Texans always brag about is our grid. But I've got a utility expert whose primary purpose in coming to the Brazos Valley was to make sure when a snowmageddon or some other crazy event happens is that we all still have power. And I thought,
people here are without power for an entire month.
Yeah, it's just insane. So we're talking about Bryant College Station, right? Very populated, good. We get out to the rural grid. Yeah, absolutely. I just don't think that I think that if a facility or strains local grids and raises the cost for the residents and impacts your power, I just think that's a problem. I don't know how you say that it's not. I don't understand how that's not in a talking point amongst the stakeholders in this potential project. Large projects should be responsible for their own energy solutions instead of that putting that burden on y'all.
Right.
On the taxpayers.
Right. Yeah. We should never have to foot the bill for that infrastructure.
No, not absolutely, not at all.
Not at all. The tax abatements are tax breaks, nothing. If you can't afford to build the what you want to build without putting it on my shoulders,
yeah,
don't build it.
Yeah. I mean, it's really funny because when you talk about taxpayers, and I mean, there has to be a very clear direct benefit to the local community. And, we need to ask hard questions. Okay, those jobs you say that you're bringing, how long are those jobs going to last, excuse me. And, what are the other benefits from it? Okay, great. So then, by the way, we happen to read about these other places in Texas that were negatively impacted, these places in Virginia that were negatively impacted.
Right.
How are you going to help us avoid that? So you should be a beneficiary and not an afterthought. And remind me later, and I'm going to tell you something I've been thinking about with historical case studies and government doing big projects.
Okay.
So whenever you're talking about those risks that are coming to those communities, we're really looking into the fire risks. When one of these large industrial facilities comes into a community, it's going to create a fire risk. So who should be responsible for footing the bill for the training, the equipment, all the things that is going to be needed? Because we have a volunteer fire department. So we've already heard from our fire chief, they just don't have what is needed or even the training to do that.
Or
so
the
who
people.
puts that
Or the
bill?
people. Yeah, I was going to say
they don't even have the people, the staff.
Yeah, they said they're understaffed, undertrained, and under-equipped to handle any kind of emergency out at those places.
You know what's crazy is I'm going to talk about a couple of national level issues and historical issues relative to this and training and helping people. Look, if a facility is increasing the fire risk, to me, it's the company that's responsible because they're the one that brought the risk anyway. You were just sitting here minding your own business, doing life the way you do life. So for me, it's the company that owns that risk, full stop. If you introduce risk, you're the one that has to mitigate it. So, and volunteer fire departments, man, I'm kind of scared. I feel like God's on my side or something in this whole deal helping y'all. Because last night, y'all, no kidding, I ran into a guy who just came to A&M to stand up their fire aviation program. He had been a fire chief up north, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Can I ask you some questions? And he was like, yeah, okay. Are you all right? So I started asking him, and I've got other friends who are fire professionals, but I said, okay, tell me about active career firefighters and volunteer firefighters. And in a fire company, in a natural situation, I'm guessing you've got 4 to 6 guys, gals, whatever, in a truck, and you've got that, and that's a normal situation. In volunteer fire department situation, and I've seen some of our volunteer fire departments driving around the east part of the district, y'all. And I'm definitely, it is on my list to help our county judges out to figure this out because what he said is that, look, if something goes down and there's a catastrophic incident, you get 1 or 2 folks and not only is it who's available to get off the tractor and come in or get out of the wherever they're doing, working, whatever, and get to the call. And you don't know if Tom and Joe are even certified on this piece of equipment or that piece of equipment. So if we run into the training perspective, the Army had a black eye several years ago when the Abu Ghraib thing happened. And it wasn't because this was prisoners being mistreated and wrongly cared for, is a very nice way to say it, but that it was not good. And what happened was you have these people, you can't blame the National Guard and say it's because the National Guard. When you think about training and you think that a National Guard or reservist gets 38 days of training out of the whole year or whatever it is, it's some small number in comparison to an active duty unit. And so it just makes sense from a math perspective. If I'm training 200, 300 days a year on my tasks that I do, whether it's turning a wrench or firing a weapon or whatever I'm doing, I'm going to be proficient at my task.
Right.
And it's unfair to put this big responsibility on a volunteer fire department.
Oh, yeah.
And the state level guy that I was talking to the other day, if this is not, we can talk about it some more later, but he said that, he's seen it when these companies are coming in and saying, hey, is it okay to have a volunteer fire department do this? Will you sign off on this certification? And they're like, nope. They, because you can't run a certification through.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I was actually going to spend a little bit of time with one of my bonus dads, Jay Wynn, and we were both leaving Tractor Supply. He calls on the way to his house. I'm right behind him, and he says, Annie, he was like, so there's a fire out north of 39. He was like, I've got to go home. I got to get the radio. I got to go to the station. I got to get a truck, and then I got to get to the fire. So we're going to have to reschedule. But just all of those things, he's, thankfully we were already almost to Marquay, but that's immediately leaving where he's at to go home, get the radio, get this other stuff that he needs, then go to the station to get a fire truck, then go to the fire. I mean, it's not like you can just make that 911 call and they're going to load up and be headed that way. That's not how a volunteer fire department works.
I don't know enough like a fire professional on the, when you're overseas and you're in a bad situation, and somebody gets hurt, they say there's a golden hour. And that golden hour relative to first aid, if somebody has a critical injury, you got to get them out in that first hour or their life expectancy just drops, and it's horrible. So now you shift over and you think about, fire science itself. I mean, how quickly, depending on what kind of agent you're going to use, agent meaning like water, aqueous, or AFFF or whatever, to try to put out that fire. I mean, how long do you have to get on top of that fire before it's out of control?
Before you burn up thousands of acres and houses and
the school,
mass evacuation.
Yeah,
that's right.
1.5 miles from the school.
I have a quick story.
1.5 miles from the school. How do you evacuate the school?
I have a quick story that highlights what you were saying about that low response when it's a volunteer. So we had just moved here. I think we'd been here a year and a half, maybe 2 years tops. I had just gotten a tractor within 6 months of this happening, and we had our pasture cleared. And I told the guy that did it, I was like, dig me a pit and build me a berm around it so I got a bunch of stuff I need to burn off. And so I'm dragging stuff over there with my tractor and dropping it in with the grapple, and I got something a little too heavy, and I tipped that tractor right in that fire. And I was freaking out, and I jumped out of my tractor and ran to the house as fast as I could, and, screaming, call 911, call 911. And the guy shows up, one guy, just like you were saying, one guy shows up with his truck. And, he's calmed down now. We're going to handle it, and the tractor was still running, and it was fueling the fire, but it was blowing it away from the cab to keep it from catching on fire. I got so lucky. Wow. Well, he pulled that sucker out, we got it out, and no big deal. Well, before we moved out here from San Antonio, I had a neighbor who had a fire in their garage. And when the first fire truck showed up, it wasn't the first fire. It was not one fire truck. 3 fire trucks showed up. About 8 or 10 guys jumped out. Eventually the whole house caught on fire and it burned down. But, by the end of that, we had 12 or 15 trucks on that street and probably 50 firefighters out there fighting that house fire. So, I mean, it's a huge difference between the response you get out here in the country versus what you have inside of the city where there's lots of dedicated firefighters. So
the full-time fire force.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That literally live in the firehouse 24/7.
Right. Yeah. Well, if those fires, if they jump out of control, who ends up being financially responsible for stuff like that?
Well, I think it's got to be the company. One of the guys I reached out to for preparation, the one that I was talking to, being concerned about certifications with, in the case of certifying rural volunteer fire departments, we were talking about just bunker gear. And the short answer on if it spreads beyond the facility, who pays, to me, it's the company. It's the person that brings the risk in. Again, they should be responsible. But back to bunker gear, and I was hearing a volunteer firefighter talk to me about this in San County, and forgive me, San Jacinto folks, folks. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I was talking to this volunteer firefighter in San Jacinto, and he at the VFW, and he was telling me that bunker gear for them is an issue. And then, so if you put yourself in a catastrophic situation where, let's say, one of those battery plants or something that's toxic is on fire and you have to let it burn down, any of the first responders, any of the firefighters and their gear that go in there, the likelihood that they're going to be able to recertify that gear and get it cleaned is almost zero, because they cannot 100% certify that that gear will work again as it should
Right.
in another event.
Yeah.
And y'all, the range of the gear cost, full set, including the respirator, is like $10,000 to $12,000 a set.
Wow.
Oh,
And
wow.
so these are some of the things, when I was talking about business cases earlier, that these folks have got a plan for. You need to have 1, 2, first and secondary suits on and bunker gear sets on hand in case something bad happens. Because
They should be paid for by the company,
that's right.
not our tax dollars.
That's
Or
exactly right. And
pilot with teeth.
Yeah, not with the pilot money.
I don't understand that. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It's got to benefit the community, and it's, if it's that important, you need to factor that into your model. So
Definitely.
I'm going to assume that you agree that the industrial company should carry a long-term environmental liability insurance. 10 years from now, if pollution shows up, if the water's tainted,
Yeah.
who should shoulder the bill to fix that? And then how do you force a company to do that once it's sold 6 or 8 times? Because this is what they do. They build, they sell, they sell, they sell.
well, I'm not a lawyer, Dan, but I just think that insurance has to pass to the company ownership if it's 3 owners post original owner, but that insurance has to be paid for by the company, because that's not, you can't do that to it's not right to do it to any community, never mind a rural community that doesn't have that capacity. And I just thinking about 10 years in a business model, when you're talking about something like this that carries long-term risk with it, I immediately think about the Aaron Brockovich movie, and I know that's a completely separate thing, but why aren't we thinking about what happens 30 years from now to kids who grew up here and all these things? And it just doesn't make sense to me. So I think that the company needs to carry the long-term environmental liability.
We're dealing with that now. One of my friends has got a defunct gas well in his place, trying to figure out who owns it. Called everybody. It needs to be cleaned up around it. It's not safe, and nobody claimed ownership of it.
Yeah.
So you can find who it was leased to, but you can't find the original driller and everything else. And this is from 30 years ago.
That original driller probably gone, long gone. I mean,
Definitely.
to me, we can look at West Texas and see exactly what the future of these empty data centers may end up looking like. Just take a look around No Trees, or any of them places around Kermit. Wink. It's just abandoned oil fields and stuff leaking everywhere. And who owns the wells? Hell, half the time they turned everything back over to the original landowners. Original landowners don't want to take any responsibility for it, because they're like, I didn't do it. I didn't make this big mess. And
the original landowners shouldn't have to take responsibility for the cleanup.
Yeah.
No, they shouldn't. All right, so talking about eminent domain. So I know that was a hot topic whenever we were dealing with the high-speed rail. We could definitely see eminent domain being a key factor in some of these whenever you're talking about getting electricity to these. You're talking about getting fiber to some of these places. So do you oppose using eminent domain to support these private industrial projects?
Yes, I think that eminent domain should be reserved for true public use, not private profit. I think that it is, again, I'm not an attorney, but I just think as it relates to justice and doing what's right, I think that there has to be proof that this is truly of benefit to the public. And it's really hard for me to accept that it is if there's a private company benefiting, and that's our model. And I love our system, but how do you show that this is fair?
Right.
That it's going to help people.
Right.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Well, can you name a position that you hold that'll upset either the developers or the donors?
Yeah, absolutely. I just don't support projects that, depend on hidden subsidies or, shift the long-term risk onto the rural landowner and the community. I just don't think that's right. It's not that I'm anti-business. I'm very pro-accountability, and that's exactly what it is. If I do something, I am responsible for it, and I have to own it. And it is, I'm sorry, but whatever. You just don't show up and then, wash your hands and then say, all right, see you later.
Right.
Right.
Good or bad, if I do it, it's my fault. Either
That's
pat
right.
me on the back and tell me
That's
good
right.
job, or say you shouldn't have done that. You're in trouble.
Yep. Yeah. It's kind of like,
difference.
on a large scale down to the small scale, what I was joking about with y'all, I can't remember if we were recording yet, but about the whole election integrity thing about, hey, I'm sorry, I missed those 200 voters that don't really exist, so I'm going to clean it up.
Right.
People will forgive you if you own things and you get in there and be a part of the community that you're forcing to, take this.
So we've got a forum coming up at Jewett here pretty quick. I know you'll be there. So
Yes, sir.
what question do you wish rural voters would ask every candidate that's going to represent them?
Who pays for this if it goes wrong is one.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm writing that down. Who pays? Yeah.
And then the other piece of it is, can you tell me the difference between a regular fire department and a volunteer fire department?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anne's writing both those questions down. You might get asked that on Thursday.
Yeah. I mean,
English teacher and me.
yes, ma'am. It is just like, it really frustrates me. I think this is what, it's funny. I try to tell my son that, the world's not black and white, but golly, Pete, man, if you got values, it's just some things that it's just like, I've been in the military,
Either right
I've been
or
in
wrong.
corporate America. You just there's right and wrong, and you've got to do the right thing.
Yes.
And, you got to serve. Yeah. I mean, anytime you do something, you're going to mess with the environment when you bring one of these places in. And I get it. So the thing that I wanted to tell you about before, is I don't know if this is an accurate case study, y'all. I've still got to dig into it some more. But I remember when we were in that time of nuclear research in the 30s and 40s, and the Oak Ridge community in Tennessee was built, and some of the communities out west that were built to help further and build our nuclear program.
Mm.
And they built those communities for those people so that they could live there and work there. Now, I'm not trying to cherry pick and give an example, and I'm for less government than I am more, but I do believe that there needs to be guardrails for the companies that are coming in our free market society, that if you're going to make a community choke down what you're bringing, you've got to help them shoulder the burden of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's what's right. And so my analogy, and I've got to look into it more, in Oak Ridge and some of the other places for because nuclear research was a national security issue then, right? So that's what I'm saying. If AI is such a national security issue, okay, I got it. Then let that's fine, but you've got to help the communities that you're forcing it on.
Or designate an area in the county where you can build a data center. Look, you can put a data center here, but it's got to go right here. Something that's not farmland, that's prime farmland, or something that's not going to hurt a bunch of people.
The thing that bothers y'all, I gotta believe, that is because it just doesn't pass the smell test when somebody's trying to sneak things in between the legislative sessions in whatever county government thing, just trying to sneak it past. And
Mm-hmm.
if it would be good for us, they would be jumping up and down, screaming. There'd be billboards. They'd be like, "Oh, this is awesome! Look."
Yeah.
Right. And we've asked them, we've invited them, we've emailed them, we've asked them to come tell us how wonderful this is going to be for our community, and nothing.
Well, it's not nothing. They went ahead and took all of their projects off their website completely, so that no one can see any projects that they're doing anymore. That's what they've done.
Yeah. So on their website, they had a link that was current projects you could click on, and it had everything that they were involved in.
With map links.
Yes, with links. So now that is gone, completely gone.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Well, that shows that you guys are doing a great job. I think that people are rallying around your cause and wanting to help you and very educated, very, just great folks that want the right thing to happen. Look, I like what you said earlier, Dan, and it is, and I remember, I don't know this lady. I bet if I described her, she had her son with her at the Marquet Citizens Against the Marquet Data Center town hall.
Mhm.
She looked at me because I'm a candidate, and she goes, well, this is coming. We can't stop that. But what about our schools? And what about fire? And she was just like, she went right past the I don't want it here to, well, I ain't going to be able to do anything about this. And she said, what are you going to do for me? And I was
Right.
like, all right,
Right.
way to go. But yeah, you said earlier, Dan, is responsible growth.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what we're advocating for. We've got the new nonprofit set up now, Citizens for Responsible Growth in Leon County. I said this at the town hall. We were quiet too long and just kind of complacent, and we're not anymore. So,
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad y'all are involved because that's your home. That's your way of life. I'm just grateful to be kind of on an outside circle looking in and trying to encourage y'all to stick up for yourself. So
you've been a great help. We
Yeah,
appreciate everybody else.
We do, thank you.
It's a great help.
Well, I appreciate y'all. And, we've got to keep believing and hoping in our system. I still believe it's the best system that there is in the world, but we've got to participate so it doesn't turn into something it wasn't supposed to be.
Correct. Yeah. Well, Rob, thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time and you missing the Super Bowl for us. And
This Super Bowl to talk about data centers.
yeah,
Thanks, Rob.
definitely.
Hey, I care.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well,
All right, y'all.
We'll see
Y'all
you
take
next
care.
time. Bye bye.
See you Thursday.
All right. Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.